Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of Geek History Lesson. I am Jason, more podcast for you, Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson. Welcome to your Mind University because, wait, what? It's the end of the week.
It's the end of the week as we know it. No, it's not.
That's a great song, though.
REM. It's really great. But that sound is usually a sound that we play at the beginning of bonus episodes for the Patreon. But we're playing it for you guys, our regular listeners, and we're giving you 2 episodes of Geek History Lesson this week because you've heard us talk about it on our Twitters, on our Facebooks, and all this kind of stuff. Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio, our original graphic novel, is hitting comic book stores. When, Ashley?
On Wednesday, October 7th, 2020. Hello, future
That was quite.
people.
That was pretty loud.
Yeah, that's why I leaned away.
Okay. But, you know, we've talked about it many times. We're very proud of this book. And a lot of people have asked us questions about this book. And I thought this would be the perfect time, perfect place to just talk about it. Now, I want to warn you right at the gate. This is not going to be just a giant commercial for the book. We had a lot of questions. Ashley, in fact, had a great question just earlier this day, on the day we're recording this, about Jupiter Jet. Ashley, what was that question?
Yeah, so somebody asked us. I also want to add really quick, there's no spoilers for Volume 2.
Or Volume 1.
Or Volume 1. Somebody asked me on Instagram Live what inspired Jupiter Jet.
Yeah.
And that's a really lovely question because it's not something we get asked a lot. We get asked a lot about how the idea came to be or what the pitch was like. And if you've listened to any of our interviews on other podcasts or other shows, we tell the story about how I said, I have an idea for a comic book character and it's Jupiter Jet and that's the whole thing. And that's a bad way to pitch your co-writer. We're very fortunate that it worked out this time. But what really inspires Jupiter Jet for me is kind of twofold. The first part is Jason and I both really started reading comics in the 90s. And 90s, even mainstream comics were kind of magical in this way that if you were like me and you were reading Robin and Batman, as a little kid, it wasn't too scary, but there were still lots of stakes and there was danger and there was action. And that is something that's a little lost right now. Even though I enjoy a lot of modern Batman, I don't know if I would have handed it to little 6-year-old Ashley.
Well, and that's something that I think is very interesting about what we're talking about today, because one, it's we're talking about a character in a book that we made,
yes,
that other people haven't made, and you are right on that point. And I've talked about this on the pod several times, where I am such a fan of those 90s tie-in comic books to the animated series, to the Superman adventures, the Batman, the adventures in the DCU type of books, and those books are so good because modern comic books have become so steeped in you have to know what's going on in every event. You've got to read like every book.
And Justice League and Nightwing and Batwoman
and if you don't read every book, then you're like completely lost and you have to go to like spoiler sites or you have to download it illegally, which we would never suggest doing.
Absolutely not.
As comic book creators ourselves. And, you know, that's really a big part what inspired the tone of our comic book Jupiter Jet is that we were like, let's recapture those comic books from the early 90s, late 80s, I would say, probably more late 80s, because the 90s is when it got really crazy into the super events and Image broke big. But I would say more, I don't know, pre-Zero Hour DC.
Yeah, it was going to be like a lonely place of dying onward, because that's Tim's intro.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like we spend a lot of time trying to recapture that feeling that we had when we were reading comics, even though if you look at Jupiter Jet on the surface, it is very different from probably some of the titles that inspired us. I know you were really into a lot of the Spider-Man stuff that was going on at that time, and there's not like a...
Only because of Ben Reilly.
And there's not a huge, like there's no Ben Reilly analog. And we do have a blonde boy.
Actually, here's a fun fact.
Yeah.
Let's do a 10-cent origin for Jupiter Jet. And you're completely not unprepared for this, but let's...
yeah, I have no notes.
Hey, well, it's our book, so it should be pretty easy to do. What would you say, what is the 10-cent origin for the Jupiter Jet franchise?
Jupiter Jet is a all-ages science fiction original comic book series published by Action Lab Entertainment's YA imprint. It was created by Jason Inman and Ashley Victoria Robinson, who are the co-writers on this series, with original art by Ben Matsuya, cover designs by John Boy Myers, among others, colors in the original series by Mara Jane Carpenter, and in Volume 2 by Elizabeth Kramer, letters and logo design by Taylor Esposito, with additional design work by Carlos M. Mangual. And it stars a teenaged Jacky Johnson who lives in Olympic Heights and has a jetpack that she inherited from her father. Is that a good 10 cent? I don't remember when the first issue was published.
Well, I was going to say that the
originally published in 2017.
Well, the complete Volume 1 was published in 2017, with Volume 2, Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio, going to be published October 7th, 2020. And it's available for pre-order now. We want to real quick, we should tell you guys, before we get too far into this podcast, that we are doing a pre-order contest for our comic book. If you pre-order the book, and you can pre-order it anywhere, Amazon, Walmart, all those places.
By the way, if you're a Kickstarter backer, send us that as well. That counts as a pre-order.
That counts as a backer kit. It counts as a pre-order. If you've already pre-ordered, that counts. If you email us your proof of purchase, your proof of purchase to jupiterjetcomic@gmail.com, you will be entered to be one of the people randomly picked, and only one person will be picked to win an exclusive Jupiter Jet art print. There's 6 of them. There's 6 different prints. One of them will be signed by the artist John Boy Myers. Some of them will be signed by us. A trading card pack set of all the Jupiter Jet comics or characters, a Jupiter Jet magnet. And the most important prize, we will pick a character in Volume 3, and it will be named after you.
Dun, dun, dun.
So that's the biggest thing. So, and this only counts for pre-orders and pre-order orders that we get before 9/15, because that's final order cutoff. So Ashley, we talked about where the name of Jupiter Jet came from.
No, we didn't.
Well, you said that you'd always wanted to write a character named Jupiter Jet.
Yeah, she is, though, low-key and named after Sailor Jupiter, who is my favorite character from Sailor Moon. That's where the Jupiter came from. And actually, if you look at her color scheme in Volume 1, the purples and the greens, those are not the same tones and shades, but they are inspired by Makoto Kino's colors as well.
And just to really quickly, let's get out very quickly a synopsis of Volume 1 so we can talk about Volume 2. Jupiter Jet Volume 1, of course, is the 16-year-old girl finds out that she has a jetpack. She lives in a 1930s-ish inspired world. It's sort of like retro futuristic or steampunk future, however you want to call it. And she's fighting this villain called Praetor Pluto, who's a very big dude with green glowing eyes, and has all these robot minions named Legates. And of course, over the adventure, Jacky and her younger brother Chuck, who is 10, and his best friend Neil, who is I think 11 or 12 in that volume.
He's 12 in that volume.
Sort of help Jacky decide to become the superhero named Jupiter Jet, where she protects her city, Olympic Heights. And through a Rocketeer-style adventure, Jacky learns that the Praetors, Praetor Pluto being one of these people, are actually aliens.
Dun, dun, dun.
Da, da, da. And that's why they have future tech, and that's why they have robots. And of course, she is able to beat Praetor Pluto. She learns a big secret that I will not spoil here in case you want to read Volume 1. And that leads her into deciding to become Jupiter Jet full on, with the newspaper's name her Jupiter Jet. And that leads us into Volume 2, which is called Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio. And it's now 1 year later, because here's the fun thing that we're doing with the Jupiter Jet franchise. We're moving each volume up a year. So Volume 2, she's now 17, Chuck's now 11. We've always said in many places that we would, in a perfect world, if everything goes right and all the planets align, there will be 5 volumes of Jupiter Jet, and each volume will move her head ahead a year. Now, this one's called Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio. So I assume, well, I know, but for the listeners, the Forgotten Radio is going to be a pretty important part of this book, correct?
It is. You're going to meet the Forgotten. We're going to discover the Forgotten Radio pretty early on. In Volume 2, and it is going to play a very important part to the overarching narrative and to the personal arcs of 3 of the characters that we have.
Yes. Now,
do you know one is a secret?
Yeah, correct.
Unless you've read it because you're a Kickstarter backer.
Yes. But to the people that are, looking at the book coming out in the future, I was very, I guess, passionate about this not being called Jupiter Jet Volume 2 or Jupiter Jet 2. I'm very picky about titles. That's why in the Bill and Ted episode, I love that. I love that it's called Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. I love that it's called Bill and Ted Face the Music. And we went through a lot of alternate titles for this book. We revealed in a couple of places, but we can reveal it here, that there is going to be a red rock called Fontanium. I'll tell you the story about why we named it because it's an interesting story. Called Fontanium in this book. And it's pretty important. It's going to be important to the Jupiter Jet franchise going forward. And so one of the original titles for this book was Jupiter Jet and the Red Dust and Jupiter Jet and the Mystery of the Red Rocks. And then we decided on Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio. And I think I pitched that title because I thought it sounded very much like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade or Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Well, initially, when we were titling the book as well, there was a lot more to do with the Red Rocks, and we scaled that back a little bit.
In the writing, yes.
In the writing process, in the interest of serving Jacky's story a little bit more and progressing some of the bigger mythology, because my sort of second part answer to what inspires us to write Jupiter Jet, I worry this is going to sound saccharine, but I promise you this is sincere. It is everybody listening. It is everybody who read the first book. It is everyone who has talked about it or pre-ordered or is interested in it, because we wanted to continue telling this story because people kept asking for it.
Yeah.
And if you hadn't asked for this, we never would have dared to do any more. And we've always said that we wanted to do 5 volumes, but because people have asked us to continue.
That was pie in the sky.
Yes, that was us when we were first thinking about pitching this, being like, oh yeah, 5 volumes, that sounds great. And because people have been asking us and people are making theories, which is so flattering and so amazing, in Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio, as it is now titled, we're starting to plant Easter eggs and seeds that are going to pay off in Volume 3 and Volume 4 and Volume 5 that we know about on our mysterious Google Doc that nobody will ever see. But it's because we can dare, because you have dared to believe in our little story about Jacky.
That is true. I don't know if Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio would have happened in 2020 without a lot of people asking for it. Like, I think it might have waited until 2021.
And I do want to say, because we all know, and especially if you're in the future, hello, future people.
Hello, how's the 5th volume? Did it work out?
I know, really. How's the animated TV show?
I want to be like Bill and Ted, and I want to hop in a time travel machine and travel to the future and, like, get the script for the 5th volume from ourselves.
Really not have to write it. I don't remember what I was saying, but it's okay.
I apologize.
It's okay.
We get all the art that way, too.
Yeah, that's
Ben
true.
would be done immediately.
Yeah, and then we wouldn't have to pay him. I'm just kidding. Pay your artist a living wage.
All right, Ashley, another question you said before we started this is, and that's part of the thing about this, is that not only we want to talk about our comic book, but we want to talk about, like, give you a peek behind the scenes of what it actually is like to create a comic book.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
So we all know, especially if you're in the future, that 2020 is a garbage year. And having Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio has brought a lot of happiness, actually, for me personally. So I just wanted to say thank you for people for bringing that to us as well.
Sure.
That was my whole thought.
Speaking of bringing stuff to us, yes. Ashley, what was the stress like of writing this thing? Because it's funny, we wrote a good chunk of this in 2019,
yes.
But we finished it in this year. Like, we finished the conclusion of it this year, I think in March. I think right as the pandemic began was when we were finishing the final volume.
Look,
the final pages.
You and I always have discussions and arguments and butt heads over things when we write. That's just what collaboration is like. But I would say that upon reflection, writing this was way more fun than monitoring the production of everything else along the way. The most, you said stress, right? The most stress for me, actually.
It was just an easy...
yeah, I know. Has come after we finished writing it. And I think that's because Jason is a big planner. Jason loves to plan everything out.
I don't love to plan, but
you do.
But I plan because that way you're prepared.
Yes. And I think this time even though we wavered and things changed and evolved as all creative things do, I actually think this process was easier than Jupiter Jet Volume 1. And if I can be very candid with the listeners, Science...
Oh, please do.
The graphic novel that we had in between here was a difficult birth.
Oh, dear Lord, yes.
So compared to Science, which is a book that I love and I'm very proud of, please, if you are press or pro, please go vote for it in the Ringo Awards.
Oh, that is correct.
She is a sweet baby who deserves better.
Yeah, Science, The Elements of Dark Energy, our second graphic novel that we did in between the volumes of Jupiter Jet, is nominated for a Ringo Award for Best Kids Comic / graphic novel.
And we're against Raina Telgemeier, and we want to give her a run for her money.
Yes. We are against Raina Telgemeier, and we are against Dogman.
Yeah, we're screwed.
Two books that are way better than we can ever write. But we do have the power of podcasting. So if anybody out there is a comic book pro or a journalist or another, I think comic book podcasters count.
Yes.
Please, we humbly ask you to consider that book. But you are right, because when we were working on Science, a lot of people don't know this. 5 artists. We had five different artists.
Des was number 5.
Yep.
We had 3 who bailed, which is fine. If you start on a project and you can't make a commitment to it, I would always rather that you let me know before we got in too deep. We got some great
before we get to page 30.
Right. We got some great design work out of it. We got a really good concept of what we wanted. One artist was very talented and couldn't hit their deadlines, and that's a bummer because deadlines are very important.
They are very important.
Comics. Yes. So just everything about Science, as much as we love that book and it was a very difficult process. So by comparison, I actually think Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio went super smooth.
Well, I think because this is not our first radio.
It's
not our first radio. It's not, that's why we forgot it. We're on the third radio. But we had Ben. You know,
we did have a new colorist. We brought Elizabeth on. Because Mara was blessedly booked, and she actually recommended Elizabeth to us. So thank you, Mara.
Yep, thank you, Mara. And Elizabeth, rose to the task.
Yeah, she's amazing.
And was just as great. And Taylor was solid. So we had the team in place, and we just sort of set a schedule. And fun fact, we had a goal. And I think I was the one that was because again, I'm the ultimate planner, as Ashley said.
Jason's a Gemini. He can't help himself.
I had a goal where I was I want the first 40 pages done before we even got in the 2020.
Because when we did the first volume, we had 7 pages done.
Yep.
This based on
before we launched the crowdfunding campaign to fund the production.
And based on the success of Volume 1 and Science and Aurora and Super Soldiers, we felt a little more confident just diving right into Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio, which is a risk that you can take with a Volume 2 that you can't take with a Volume 1. Unless you're like Jimmy Palmiotti.
But it did go much smoother. So let's get into some of the story. If you're still with us, this is so good. Let's talk about our main character, Jacky Jacqueline Johnson, because I believe in the Stanley rule that if you're in comic books, you should be alliterative.
We gave her a middle name in this volume.
What is her middle name?
Juniper.
Oh, it is Juniper.
That was my pitch.
That is your pick because now she's JJJ.
Yeah.
That is correct. Yes.
So she's gonna marry J. Jonah Jameson when she grows up.
That is funny. Yeah, she's Triple J.
Yeah.
That's very funny. So Jacky is a character that is very interesting. She's confident, yet she's very nervous. And she's
she's a 17-year-old girl.
She's bullish, but she's also very nervous. You wanted to ask this question about how is Jacky like both of us?
Yeah.
Or I guess the question would be how do we look about writing Jupiter Jet when we write her? Because it's funny, weirdly, for this volume, I think I ended up writing the majority of the Jupiter Jet scenes, and you ended up writing the majority of the Chuck, her little brother scenes for Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio.
Yes, that is true, and I think that would surprise a lot of people.
Which is funny because a lot of Jacky's situations that you will learn when you read this book are a lot of woman talking to woman scenes.
Yes,
that's not offensive, is it?
No.
Okay, I didn't know how to say.
They're two females speaking to each other.
I didn't know. It sounded very caveman when I said that. Woman talking to woman.
Jane talk to Jane.
Tarzan right woman on woman.
By the way, Tarzan books are great if people have never read them.
Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Yes, true. Good pull.
Name drop.
Close personal friend of the podcast, not at all dead, Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Tarzan's real name, secretly Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Tarzan,
They were biographical adventures.
You think Tarzan's better than John Carter?
No.
That is true. I would say with the exception of people have seen this on social media. We've talked about it a lot in a lot of different places. But the exception of the Western stuff.
Yeah.
Which those scenes, I think, were fairly equitably split because she's there for quite a while. I wrote a lot of the Chuck pages. And it's interesting because Jacky, to me, is maybe the most understated character that we have. And
Ooh,
I think
I helped co-create this character, and I don't even know what you mean by that.
I think it's because of our entire cast. Jacky is the only real person we have. Everybody else is a cartoon character. And
I'm going to disagree with that because I think, and kudos to us, and I don't, guys, we don't mean this to be like a cousin coming like, oh, how good writers we are. Oh,
I mean it that way.
But no, I think one of the coolest aspects of Volume 2 is that I think Chuck becomes a real person.
He becomes a real person.
But he did not start that way.
But Chuck is a character that I really like to write, but he can run away with scenes because he has a much stronger, broader, more cartoonish personality than Jacky does.
He likes to insult people, and he's a brat.
Well, yeah. He's actually a lot like AJ in Science, who was also a blonde boy. So if you're a blonde boy, that's what Jason and I think of you.
Yep.
I'm looking at you, Tobias.
What's up, Captain Kirk?
Yeah, really. And it's funny because when we both write Jacky, I think the traits that come out in our writing are probably what was true of us when we were teenagers. I make Jacky pretty bitchy when I write her.
You do.
And you are always walking it back. And I actually think you're the one who makes her more nervous.
Jacky's earnest.
She is Jacky to me is like, maybe it's because I don't have a child, but I kind of feel about her very similar to the way that I feel about Brago, in that like Jacky is pure. Mm-hmm. And there is a part of me that like wants to protect her.
Well,
which is weird because she's a fictional character. Nothing's going to happen to her.
So I always feel that Jacky Jupiter Jet is a character with no subtext.
Mm-hmm. It's very true.
I think she will get there, but she is, as far as it is in these 2 volumes, she is not.
Well, because she's going to become a full-blown woman of the universe.
Yeah, she is not there yet in terms of, even at the end of this volume, she's still like, I don't think she has a subtext filter. Whereas Chuck does, because a lot of Chuck's stuff is about him being brash and being very loud, but it's a cover because he is afraid.
He is, yeah.
And he's nervous.
As we see in his sort of evolution and growth, and what he goes through in this volume is actually something that we had pitched for Volume 1, but there was not enough geography for, especially because we really wanted Volume 1 to be Jacky coming into her own and developing into Jupiter Jet.
Yes, yeah. But I actually, when I'm always unsure of how to write Jacky or what Jacky will say, I have 3 things that I do. One is I always think about what is the most purest and innocent thing that somebody could say right here. Because I think 9 times out of 10, that is exactly what Jacky would say. Jacky is the hopeful character. She has a lot of similarities to Superman in that way. Whereas like if you are in...
You're also a lot like that too.
Well,
you see you're a very positive person.
Well, and that's Jacky. Like Jacky always sees the positivity. Second is that... I always think about what would teenage you be like?
You always say that she's like me but nicer.
Yes. She is like you and nicer, which is I think is the reason why you write her at the beginning very bitchy, and I'm like no, I don't think she's that bitchy. And then I forgot what my third reason is.
It's okay, it'll come back.
So I'm gonna say a spoonful of sugar.
Oh, it helps all that space medicine go down. But you had a big influence to something that we alluded to earlier, and that is when we were talking about this way back in the earliest days when we were first making our list of things that we were going to maybe include in this volume. You said, I don't care what happens, but she's going to wear a duster and a cowboy hat because Jason loves Westerns. And so for this volume, we have a little Western mome for Jacky, and that's been some of our favorite art to share so far on social media and on all the shows that we came up with. And I don't think this is a spoiler because we've seen that too. Even her riding the space lizard was something that you pitched very early.
So we were working on this volume, and I'm a very big Western fan, and I'm a very big fan of this. And so we can't say that Jupiter Jet goes to a Western planet. One, it's because it's very inspired by Star Trek, and there's a lot of Star Trek in Jupiter Jet. But two is because I love Westerns because I think they are, just like superheroes, they are one of two mythologies that are uniquely American.
Yeah, maybe those and jazz.
Yeah, jazz, but I was thinking more storytelling.
Yeah, fair.
But yes, jazz is very American as well. And so from the beginning, I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if she could she can wear a cowboy hat. And I had the idea that she rides a giant lizard because, of course, on a different planet, there's different animals. And then when we were talking about what we should name this, I had the idea that it should be connected somehow to the 1903 silent film, The Great Train Robbery.
Yes.
Which is, in fact, it's considered to be the first Western of all time. Mm-hmm. And if you have seen this film, go look it up on YouTube. It ends with this guy firing a gun at camera. And a lot of people, when they first saw it, were so scared. They were like, he's shooting at me. Fun fact, that actor is named Justice D. Barnes, and that's Justus. And as soon as I found that out, we were thinking about what should we name this new Western planet? I was like, we should name it after this guy. It should be Justice. So that's where the name for this Western planet comes from. It's called Justice.
On our whiteboard that we used to break down what each sort of section of this was going to be, we wrote Justice at the top, all in caps, in a red marker. I remember sitting on the floor, cross-legged, and doing that.
Yeah, and I think we went through a bunch of different names for it, and I can't remember. And by the way, this is an exclusive for us. I don't think we've mentioned Justice anywhere else.
I don't think we have.
We've said Western planet.
We've seen cowboys.
But there you go. You guys are the first to know Justice.
Woo.
Ashley, I want to talk about DC Fontana.
The Red Rocks?
You haven't. So we mentioned earlier that we named the Red Rocks Fontanium. Mm-hmm. We haven't mentioned this in a couple other places, but I just love this story. And it's connected to DC Fontana. Who is DC Fontana, in case anybody doesn't know?
DC Fontana is a giant of sci-fi television. She began as Gene Roddenberry's secretary.
Yes, that's correct.
Because that's when we still called them secretaries. Mm-hmm. And worked her way up to being a writer on Star Trek TOS. And she has had a huge influence on Star Trek and sci-fi lore since then. She is an iconic redhead. And most importantly, she is all about the Vulcans. She laid out and created so much of their mythology. And if you've listened to any of our Star Trek episodes in the past, Vulcans are my favorite thing about Star Trek. So the fact that it was all laid out and created by this amazing young woman who continued to be such a great force in the fandom. She was so kind. She was a great mentor to a lot of people. And we recently lost her. Jason pitched that, and it could not have been a more perfect way to pay a tiny tribute to this amazing woman.
Well, because we're
hoping Jacky will be at least that amazing.
We were trying to figure out, what do you call this rock, right? And
fake space things are so hard to name.
They're very hard to name.
There's no naming convention. There's no rules. Rules make things easier, my friends, at least in creativity.
I will also say this. Mm-hmm. There is a scene in this book, and this is the reason why we named it Fontana. There is a scene in this book that references your mother's name.
Yes.
My mother's name.
Yes.
And DC Fontana's name, all in the same sentence.
Yeah,
and that where this was birthed, and that's how we got to that Fontanium. And I'm really proud about that. And Fontanium is going to be an important part of the franchise going forward.
And Jacky and the Children of Gaia and everything that's going to happen to them after this. It's so funny because we have ideas, but we also, at the same time, don't really know. We haven't actively started working on Volume 3 yet.
We have not worked on Volume 3. We have an outline of what a rough idea of Volume 3.
A first draft outline.
And I also will say as well that we already know what the final scene of the entire Jupiter, what the last scene of Volume 5 is. All I will say is that it involves a jet setter.
Yeah.
And leave that to your own interpretation.
And future people.
Yes. I think I will say I've only told one other person what that
was. It Jeremy?
It is our good friend and friend of the podcast, Jeremy Skinner.
Patron of these microphones, Jeremy Skinner.
my best friend from old Tulsa, Oklahoma. I have told him the final scene of Jupiter Jet just to kind of gauge his reaction.
Yeah.
And he said he loved it. So hopefully that means...
Jeremy is like low-key our beta reader. We run a lot of ideas.
Yep. I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
So in Volume 1, we talked about that the main antagonist was Praetor Pluto.
Yes, and we dealt with him completely in Volume 1. He is we put an end to him, and we're never going to see him again. And
probably. Yeah, probably. It's comic books.
I don't know. Yeah.
Comic books.
Yeah, look, when DC buys this from us like they bought Wildstorm, maybe he'll come back. Who knows?
We have a new Praetor in this book.
We do.
Praetor Venus.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about her look, a little bit about your thoughts about her, but also I want to just give a piece of confusion to the listeners here. Most stories have a protagonist and an antagonist. I would argue that Praetor Venus is not the antagonist of the story. Would you agree, co-writer?
I would agree. I would argue that...
It is a character that we have mentioned in other interviews called the Black Flyer.
Yes. I would argue that Praetor Venus initially appears to be the antagonist, but I think in general... And I guess to echo what Jason said earlier, this is not just pat ourselves on the back. I think this volume is a lot more sophisticated than Volume 1 was.
Well, let me just give myself a pat on the back. Good job, Jason.
I think that's because Jason and I have just written more things. Jason is now a very famous television writer.
I am not a famous television writer, but I will say that.
But I think we're so much better now.
As they should be.
Absolutely. And so
this podcast is better than the first podcast we ever did as Geek.
Jesus, absolute Christ, yeah.
Remember that thing?
Remember we used to record in a closet? Sweating?
Fun fact, we actually deleted the very first GHL ever, the zero episode about Sherlock.
Well, it wasn't a real episode. It was more like
it was us testing it out. But I think we put it on the Patreon if you want to listen to it.
Yeah. So Praetor Venus is and isn't the baddie of this volume, and I will say that her story's not concluded as cleanly as Pluto's is. And
wait. So she could show up in future volumes?
She could. I'll leave people who haven't
You really
read
like
it with
Praetor
that.
Venus.
I do.
Why?
And a huge part of that is her look. So we sent a bunch of vague character descriptions off to Ben to say, hey, everyone has to look different now. They're a little older.
We did this on Volume 1. In fun fact, we told the story a couple times. When we sent the original character descriptions, we gave about a paragraph, kind of like, this is the feel, this is how they act, this
Here's
is the
a character
look,
they might kind of look like.
here's the age.
Yeah.
And when Ben did the first designs of Volume 1, the first picture he ever sent us of Jupiter Jet later became one of our variant covers. It's that image of Jacky on pure white with the blue circle.
It's the Jupiter Jet sticker. It's the header banner of the
for Volume
OG
1.
Volume 1.
Yeah, that was the first picture he ever drew of her.
Yeah, he crushed it.
He's good at character design.
And so for Venus, I really wanted Venus to be a powerful woman and to be a powerful, not white woman. And so we sent Ben a vague description, and he basically sent us back, what if Grace Jones in space with various different hairstyles and color schemes? And I love Grace Jones. I love Shea Coulee. So I was just so in on it.
He gave us a honkin' mohawk for one of them.
Yeah, he gave us a very Mark Silvestri does Storm
and then we decided,
mohawk.
And then we had to do the debate because up to this point, you'd never seen any of the other Praetors, the aliens, besides Pluto. And we were like, okay, are they all bald? And that's the route we went. We were like, they all have to be bald.
I think
that was the right choice.
I think she looks awesome. When they inevitably make this a live action movie, I want a bald-headed Lupita Nyong'o to play her. She'll be incredible.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I was going to go Angelica, Regina King.
Regina King. Oh, Regina King. Bald-headed Regina King.
I will say there is a scene in this book where Praetor Venus kicks somebody out of an airlock.
Yes, she does. Yeah.
And I tell you what, Regina King would murder that scene.
I just think too, it's because she's kind of sexy, and Pluto. Look, if anyone thinks Pluto is sexy, great. But Pluto was kind of dumpy by comparison.
Well, Pluto's Otto Octavius.
Yeah, that's
who he is.
And look, if that's your type, awesome. We're not yucking anyone's yum, but Venus is just like so striking, and I think she's really fun. And because we don't,
She's more snake-like.
Yes.
Whereas Pluto was a bruiser.
We don't delve into the full depths of her evil in this volume. So I find her very intriguing, and I find her to be a character full of possibilities. And I will tease people who haven't read it with this. She has a very close personal tie to Jacky.
She does.
That's going to be revealed in this volume. And we're just better writers, so we did cooler things with her than we did with
Okay, I think that's enough patting ourselves on the back. Oh boy, my back's got a little bruise there.
I know.
I'm very proud of the book too.
I'm so proud of like our growth as well as Jacky's growth.
Okay, so one last thing, a couple other things I want to talk about.
Totally.
One, I want to park this in your brain because I'm worried I'm going to forget it after I ask you my first question.
Okay.
Is I want us to finish off this podcast talking about what Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio. What do you think the theme or what it means to us?
Heard.
But first, I want to talk about Chuck. So Chuck Johnson, Jacky's little brother. He's 11.
Yeah.
And
he's a butthead, man.
he is a butthead, but he's an amazing inventor. He has a lovely kitty, Puddles, named Puddles.
And now Jason and I have an actual kitty, so there's a lot more cat in this
A lot more
volume.
cat. There's a cat splash page.
Thank
just
you,
throwing it out there.
Brego, for your
GHL intern
consultation.
Brego.
We have that page.
We do have that page, thanks to Ben. I want to say, I think I might have revealed this in a couple places, but when we were writing volume 1 and we decided that there had to be a cat in it, I came up with the name Puddles, and I don't know where it came from, but I remember I told you the origin story because we were thinking about doing it as a backup, and then we didn't do it. Whereas the idea that young Chuck found this kitty
in a puddle
in the rain, and that's why he named them Puddles.
I'm going
to reveal this too.
I'd love to throw you under the bus
Please
for this.
do.
Yeah, you wanted to have Pluto murder the cat.
It wasn't that. It was a pitch. Again, it was a pitch I thought that I was like, at the end of volume or towards, before you do your climax. There's a thing in story, like your rising action, is you always give your hero the worst possible thing that ever happened so that your hero can overcome it and then win the day. And in volume 1, we decided, okay, Pluto captures Chuck.
Yeah. And that's what it became.
And he burns their home down.
Yeah.
But for that moment, I was like, do we kill the cat?
Yeah,
is that? And we walked back from it because we were like, no, this is a kid's book. We can't do that.
It's not that it's a kid's book, right? It is very much an all ages in the traditional sense, but they are going to put this on the shelf with kids.
Yes. And we didn't want little kids bawl their eyes out because we killed Puddles the cat.
No, Puddles is going to outlive a lot of characters.
Puddles gets so many pages in this, but we're talking about Puddles' owner, Chuck.
Yes.
Now, we've talked about Saturn Scout for a long time. We kind of came up with that name. And this is a lot of Chuck's journey as Saturn Scout. And if anybody has read Volume 1, we intentionally put it in the first issue of Volume 1. Chuck does this, and this was very inspired. This was my pitch. I was very inspired by Batman Forever, where there's a scene where Chris O'Donnell says to Val Kilmer before he's Robin, where he's like, oh, I want to help you, Batman. And he goes, I don't know, Batboy, Nightwing. And he's like, I need a name. And so in Volume 1, we were like, oh, we should just have Chuck say Saturn Scout. So he goes through a bunch of different names. I think Cosmic Boy was one of them.
And when we wrote that out in the original description for Ben drew him with this incredible Saturn ring inspired belt, which truly, Ben's done a lot of really great design. It's my favorite thing he ever did.
And so as soon as we saw it, we were like, we incorporated it, and it's in Volume 2.
It is, yeah.
But for me, a lot of this book, it's so funny. A lot of this book is Jupiter Jet and her brother Chuck, or Jupiter Jet and Saturn Scout, are separate. They're separate for a lot of this book.
They're separate as siblings, as people, but they're also separate as heroes for the first time, and each growing into sort of their next evolution and what that's going to be. And for Chuck, in a lot of ways, it echoes what Jupiter Jet was doing in Volume 1.
Yeah, he's sort of going through her journey. Yes, because he learns the truth. He finds out about the Praetors.
He's got his own man in the chair.
Yep. Yeah. And he has his own climax as well. But I think it's very interesting. And I love we have a new design for Chuck in this volume, and like he wears like a green sort of like I don't know, overalls, and then I like to call it like a Ninja Turtle mask because it's what I wore when I was a little kid, where I cut eyes and like an orange sock, and I was like, this is my Raphael mask. And Ben did that amazing job in the art. Okay, so talk about Jupiter Jet and these little pieces and writing it and doing stuff like that. Ashley, if someone's listening to this and they've made it, we're at almost 39 minutes here, according to my timer. They made it this far. And they're still not, they're like, I don't know if I want to read this, guys. I like you just as podcast hosts, or I like you just as YouTubers. Just review stuff and stop writing. Well, that's never going to happen because that's my dream. I am a writer. That's what I want to do.
Jason's a very famous TV writer.
I'm not a very famous TV writer. One day. But what would you say Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio is about? Or what would you say to somebody who's like, why should I read this book?
I would say, do you remember at the end of your teenage years when you, for the first time, realized what the responsibility of being an adult in this world felt like? And I would say that this volume encapsulates that, but it puts the weight of an entire planet, an entire galaxy on a girl's shoulders. And it teaches her what it's going to mean to be a hero instead of being a person of action. That's what I would say. What would you say?
It's funny that I was going to say something very similar to that.
Well, you better get more creative. That's why you don't go first.
Now I got to rewrite. Anyways.
Take two.
The journey of Jupiter Jet is a journey of heart. And it is a lot about this girl learning about responsibility and being like, oh my God, I never thought being a hero was about this, was about a lot of it is her realizing like, oh, I can't just worry about me anymore. I have to worry about this entire planet because my actions affect everyone. And up until this point, she didn't realize that. And it's her like learning that lesson the hard way. And she's going to take a very heavy hit in this in this volume. She almost doesn't have a happy ending in this volume.
I was going to say that I don't think Jacky has a happy ending at the end of either of these volumes. Volume 1 is definitely much more uplifting, but she kind of has a scare at the end of both of these volumes, and it's not necessarily because it's sad, but it's also because that is what growing up is like.
Well, those are always like, and I think that's why this is baked into the story of our book, is that those are always the best stories to me. Like even the happiest, funnest movies, like Bill and Ted, have a bit of sadness to them. Because thinking, life is happy and sad at the same time.
I was thinking Lord of the Rings, where like Frodo literally saves the world, but he comes back and he's not the same.
Yes, and I would say that is something very similar to what happens to Jacky. And there's a lot of heart and there's a lot of humor. I would basically say that if you're looking for an adventure storyline that is pure hero's journey and pure heart, that is what Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio is.
There's
and
also a lot of family in it.
It is a lot about family. It is a lot about
found family and blood family.
Yeah. And we should mention to all our listeners, I'll have to pull it up here. Hold on just a second. But no vamping music. But I still have to find it. Hold on a second. You guys on this podcast know of my love for Green Lantern Kyle Rayner. And when...
You mean the greatest, sexiest Green Lantern?
Yes, and how a lot of his stories really got me into comic books.
If you don't know this from any of Jason's video interviews, there's actually a picture of Kyle Rayner over Jason's desk.
Yeah, you know what? That might be actually a fun thing to share on the...
I will make a note.
Social media. Yeah, I bought it about 5 years ago, and I put it directly over my desk because I want to use it to inspire me. It's a store. It's a poster from a comic retailer store. It's announcing the first issue of Kyle Rayner. And so Ron Mars has always been a favorite writer of mine. And one of the things that you don't know about creating comic books or creating books you might not know is that you reach out to other writers that you admire or friends and stuff, and you ask them for blurbs. And you ask for these blurbs. You give people, other writers, or celebrities sometimes, these books to ask them for a quote because you want to use that in the advertising or the promotion and all that jazz. So we had met Ron Mars a couple of times just online here and there.
I actually met Ron at the Top Cow dinner at New York Comic Con 2016.
Fun fact.
And I got sat beside him, and it was very hard to act like a human.
I've never met Ron.
He's lovely. I know you guys are just internet friends.
We're just internet friends. But the co-creator of Green Lantern, because Kyle Rayner was created by Ron Mars and Daryl Banks.
Yes, also lovely human.
So I shot for the moon, and I sent Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio to Ron Mars, and I said, hey, read it. You basically, here's a pro tip for you. If you're making something, you send it to somebody you admire, somebody you're a big fan of, and you say, hey, I've made this thing. It comes out here. Please take a read of it. If you like it, I would love if you gave us a blurb. If not, no worries. I'm still a fan. Always give them the no worries. I'm not a fan, because some people are very busy, and some people are very protective of their brand, which is totally understandable.
Yeah.
So I shot for the moon, shot for Ron Mars. Ron Mars read it, and he sent us back a quote. And this is the quote he said. He said, "You had me at Jetpack. I know a little something about building heroes, and this is how you do it, with heart and humor and high adventure." And not only did that make tiny whatever age-year-old Jason shiver in his spine all the way back in 1994 or 95, whenever I read that book. But that made me so proud. It made me amazing that a writer that I've admired for years likes our books. And if you can't believe the creator of Kyle Rayner, then you can't believe nobody about Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio.
Gosh dang right.
Gosh darn it. So yeah, Ashley, any final thoughts you want to give our listeners about our comic book that's coming out October 7th, Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio? 120 pages.
It is 120 pages. It has it's got a stunning cover. We hood boggled John Boy Myers into giving us a second cover.
By the way, I've been using that a lot in my lexicon, so I love that that word I introduced on a Ken Knopsack podcast, hood boggle, has now entered the vocabulary.
It's got some really amazing pinups in it by other great creators who have lent us their time. Nicholas Scott returns, actual Amazon goddess Nicholas Scott. Brian Lopez has contributed an amazing piece of art. And Brian helped us last year with the 2019 Jawiin Comic Drive for Service members, donated his time, and was like low-key a favorite of the event. So I'm hoping that we can bully him into working with us again in the future. So, I mean, there's a lot of amazing stuff in here. If you like this podcast and you like Jason and I, and you want to get a little deeper, you can actually find a lot of really personal stuff in this volume. We're so proud of it. Jupiter Jet has been the biggest, craziest thing that we have created to date. And it is truly, it's my honor to share this book with you. And I hope that you enjoy it.
Let me ask you this real quick. Final question. How crazy is it? Because this sometimes stymies me. How crazy is it that we made a sequel? To an original character that we made.
I'm gonna
Sometimes
try not
when I look
to
at
swear.
it, like when I look at it, I'm like, holy cow. There's a 2.
Amazing. And the thing that I said at the beginning, I'm so thrilled that people want it, because we all know people who hold on to an idea because they love it, and we obviously love it, but other people love her too. And that means so much more to me than any crazy ideas you and I have talking about her.
All right, everybody. So Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio is available in comic book stores on October 7th. But as you know, as we've mentioned several times in this podcast and previous episodes, pre-orders really matter to books and comic books. So if you are interested in this book, I please ask you, go tell your comic book store about it, because when they hear interest in a book, they 9 times out of 10 will buy more than one copy for other customers.
Because if you like it, someone else might like it.
Exactly. And also, pre-orders are very important on Amazon and other places like that. So if you have pre-ordered Jupiter Jet, thank you so much. If you haven't, please consider it. And I hope you're sticking around on this podcast. And again, don't forget to enter that pre-order contest, because we have all kinds of information out there. If you follow on my newsletter, I gave a secret code that helps up your chances.
Your number of entries.
Your number of entries. Yeah, it's just,
You want to see your name in ink, kid? Enter the contest.
Basically, yeah. It's just really cool that this book is in a reality, and I wanted to tell everybody about it. We wanted to tell everybody about it. Like, instead of, I know we do the advertisement, and we're going to keep doing the advertisements, because if you don't promote yourself, what's the point?
Exactly.
But we just wanted to be real. And for anybody that's still listening, I just want to say thank you. I really want to say thank you. And let's see if I can give them one more spoiler or one more thing. If you've stuck around this long, you're a true fan. You really are. Or you've already read the book. One of the two. Yeah, you might have read the book already, and you're just like, let's hear some of the commentary tracks.
You tell them about the necklace.
Oh, yes. Okay, so here's the story. So Jacky, Jupiter Jet, when she is on Justice, is going to receive a necklace based on, or made out of Fontanium, the red rock. So from here on out, she is going to have that necklace. It's a minor spoiler, but not very. And I think that was something I hadn't even. I was writing the pages for that set, because we always divided the book up by sections, and it was like, okay, you go write these 10 pages, I'll go write these 10 pages.
No, this was not on the outline. You just wrote this.
Because I think I was writing a scene, and I was like, I need to have Jacky get something. She has to have something of importance. And then it doesn't have to be important, but like, it would just be a cool thing.
It's symbolic.
Yeah, it would be a cool thing that in future volumes, when you see this necklace, you'll be like, oh, the Forgotten Radio.
Man, watching you bend over backwards to avoid the emotional spoiler is really interesting.
I'm really, it is like Nightwing, like, whoop, whoop, whoop,
yeah, truly.
Because who gives her the necklace is very important.
Yeah.
And so I wrote it in the script pages, and then I immediately like walked out to Ashley and was like, hey, come read this.
Yeah.
And I think you immediately went like, oh, because I made the item. It's in the image of a fox.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about Ashley's Instagram, you know that a fox is her favorite animal.
That's why Jacky's middle name is Juniper, because I love that fox.
Juniper the fox. I didn't know that. Yeah, that's so funny.
I told you that.
Oh, did you? I forgot.
I said, and you said, why Juniper? And I said, oh, like that fox on Instagram. And you said, okay, I guess. You were not impressed.
Yeah. I know we've given Chuck a middle name too, but I honestly can't remember it. I'm pretty certain we have.
Oh boy, I don't know.
Well, because Chuck is named for Chuck Yeager.
Because I think the same character who reveals Jacky's middle name reveals Chuck's middle name in this volume.
Yes.
I don't know what it is.
Praetor Venus.
Is it Jonathan? No.
I don't remember. See, here's the thing.
We're good writers.
Just like podcasting and your children, you forget everything about them as soon as they're out the gate.
Oh, that's like how my grandma can never remember my name.
My mom, Bernadette Inman, previous Geek History Lesson
former guest,
and she, by the way, this has nothing to do with Jupiter Jet, except that Bernadette is mentioned in it. My mom recently, about a month ago, asked me on the phone. She's like, "Hey, you ever going to have me back on Geek History Lesson?"
Well, maybe this year.
And
maybe we'll record with her this year.
And I was like, figure out time and place or a thing or something like that. But anyways, so there you go. I don't remember what Chuck's middle name is. That's another excuse.
Somebody can tweet at us and tell
You should buy the book to figure it out, because I know we say it.
Yeah.
So anyways, Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio, our comic book that we're very proud of, comes out October 7th. Pre-order now. We think you'll enjoy it. It's for all ages, and by that we mean it doesn't talk down to adults, but it's also perfect for an 8-year-old. It's like Pixar.
Yep.
It's like Pixar. If you like The Rocketeer, you like Adventure Man from Image Comics, if you like just a wholesome comic book, and by the way, you don't need to read Volume 1 to read Volume 2. We recap everything for you.
Heck yeah. I think you'll get more out of it.
You will get more out of it, but it's designed just like Indiana Jones, where you can drop into The Last Crusade, and you can still enjoy it, but you'll get more out of it if you know what happened to Raiders of the Lost Ark and Temple of Doom. We're not going to talk about Crystal Skull, but that's the harumphing internet not talking about Crystal Skull.
They fridged someone in that.
That's right. Indiana Jones himself. Spoilers. Anyways, for a movie that's over a decade old. So Jupiter Jet and the Forgotten Radio, we're very proud of it. Go check it out. And you know what? If you have pre-ordered it already, don't forget to enter that contest. And also, tweet at us. We'd love to hear from you guys if you're excited for the story, or if you've already read the story. Let us know. Go crazy. Go crazy.
And also, by the way, Jupiter Jet has a Twitter, and it's at Jupiter Jet Comic.
Well done,
so
Ashley.
So you can also tweet directly to mostly me if you go at Jupiter Jet Comic. Also, if you want to hashtag it, we like hashtag Jupiter Jet Comic because that covers all the stories. Jupiter Jet Forgotten Radio can be long sometimes, so Jupiter Jet Comic is a good catch-all.
Or hashtag Jupiter Jet, that will work too.
For all your JJ thoughts.
Yeah. So there you go. Thank you so much. I hope you stuck through this whole podcast, and if you did, I'm very proud of you. You get a big hug.
May the Praetors bless you.
Oh boy.
You could be sexy, bald-headed fan yourself.
Thank you for listening to this extra special episode of Geek History Lesson. I am Jason Justice, Justus Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson, and Professor Jason, would you please dismiss the class?
Look up on the sky. It's not one flying girl. It's the only flying girl, Jupiter Jet. And maybe the Rocketeer's up there. Or maybe she was at LAX. Who knows if you've been reading the funny papers. That's all, folks.